Oh, yesterday we learned about the first commandment that appears in this week's Torah portion, Bahar. That's the name of the Torah portion. And what's the first commandment that appears is Shemitah. Shemitah means every seventh year, those people that live in Israel are not allowed to work on the land. That land is called the Shemitah year. That year has to be holy to God. Shemitah is a holy year to God. That's what we learned yesterday, remember? And in that year, you're not allowed to harvest, you're not allowed to work on your field. The field is open for everybody else. And when you can take food into your house, but as soon as there's no food in the field, then you have to take it out of your house and also give it away. The produce belongs to God, not other food. You have meat, you have cheese, you have water, you have things. Those don't you don't have to take out. But food, those crops, you do have to take out. If you made bread, you don't have to take it out also. Okay. That is every 7 years. That's the holiday of Shemitah. Not the holiday, the commandment of Shemitah. We talked about that in the Sikh in the morning. Okay. Then there's another very, very similar commandment, but this is after 7 Shmitot. In other words, you count 7 years 7 times. So each 49 years, each time you count 7 years, you make a Shemitah. Right? You make a Shemitah. So you have 7 Shmitot, means 49 years. After that year, you make the next year an additional year of same laws as Shemitah, but a little bit additional. And that year is called the Jubilee Year, Yovel. Yovel means a trumpet, a shofar. That's what the word Yovel means. Yovel because a shofar is sounded on Yom Kippur, on the 10th day of the 50th year. And then big things start happening. Really, the Yovel, it starts on Rosh Hashanah. But when the 10th day of the Yom Kippur, you sound the shofar, and then things start happening. And we'll see what it is. Okay, here we go. Ready? Commandment. V'safarta lacha, you should count for yourselves. One second. You should count for yourself Sheva Shabbatot Shanim, 7 Shabbatot Shanim. What does it mean, Sheva Shabbatot Shanim? We're going to see. Rashi says it means you have to count 7 Shemitah years. Sheva Shanim, Sheva Pamim. You have to count 7 years 7 times. Make the simple calculation. You don't have to. Here the Torah makes the calculation. What is 7 times 7? The May Sheva Shabbatot Shanim. It'll be these years, Tesha v'arba'im shana, 49 years. What does the Torah have to tell us? Because we don't know simple mathematics. So we're going to see. We're going to see what Rashi says. Shmotot shanim. You might think Sheva shanim ritzufot. Maybe you think you can just make 7 Shemitah years in a row, right? Buy land and just don't work on it for 7 years. Every year, make your own personal Shemitah, and then you'll make a Jubilee after it. Make the 50th year after it. Just the main thing is you have to have 7 Shmitot. So instead of buying land and working on it for 6 years and then leaving it fallow for a year, and then taking chances, so just buy land, leave it for 7 years, and each year call Shemitah. This is a Shemitah. I'm not going to work on the land. And after these 7 years, then you make a Jubilee year, Yovel. You think you could do that? You might think you could. Talmud Lomer, but the Torah says, Sheva Shanim, Sheva Pamim. You have to make 7 years 7 times. Havi Omer, if so, call Shemitah v'Shemitah Bismanu. You have to make every Shemitah in its time. It doesn't depend on when you bought the land, or it doesn't depend on when you want to count. There are certain years that are Shemitah years, and you have to keep, and that comes once every 7 years. And even if you buy the land 1 year before that, you can work on the land 1 year, but then the next year you have to make a Shemitah year. It doesn't depend on the farmer. It depends on the Jewish people. They start counting the Shemitot from the time they entered the land of Israel. What if you have a farmer that didn't keep the years, right? He didn't keep the years, or let's say he just bought a land right now. He just bought land that never kept the Shemitah, or let's say he didn't know there was such a law. Nevertheless, when the Jubilee comes at the end of the 49 years, the 49th year, and this is a year that everybody recognizes, it's not each, according to each and every farmer. Pshuto Shemikra, Yala Yacha Cheshbon, Shanot Ashmita, means you have to have the number 49 years. Every 49th year, you make a Shemitah. So you can't, no shortcuts. No shortcuts. You can't just say, okay, 7 Shemitahs in a row. Today is Shemitah, next year is Shemitah, next year is Shemitah. You can't do that. And also you can say, oh, listen, I didn't keep the Shemitah years. I didn't keep the Shemitah years. So if so, I don't have to do. No, as soon as 49 years pass, even if you weren't observant and you didn't do anything, nevertheless, you have to keep the YOVEL year. Now, what happens in the YOVEL year? The YOVEL year, first of all, it has all the laws of Shemitah. You don't work on the land. But in addition to that, all the land goes back. We talked about this yesterday. And this was in the time of the temple. All the land was owned by each and every individual tribe. So the land goes back to its original owner. So when you sold land, you could never sell it for more than, let's say, maximum 50 years. And also all the Jewish slaves go back home. There's a law of a Jewish slave that if you, a person who can't pay his debts, whatever, so he can sell himself. That's to prove he has no money. He can sell himself as a slave. And if he sells himself as a slave, then I have to get this straight. I hope I remember. Well, there's 2 ways you can be a slave. Either you sell yourself, or a person, let's say, is a thief or whatever, and he can't make restitution, so the court pays him. A person that sells himself, and you'll correct me if this is wrong, but I think it's not. A person that sells himself, if he wants to, first of all, he sells himself 7 years. That's it. He goes free. 7 years maximum. He goes free 7 years. Doesn't make any difference if the Shemitah year comes or not. Sells himself for 7 years. If before the end of that 7 years comes, he decides he wants to be a permanent slave. He decides he wants to be a permanent slave. He likes his master. It's a good job. He gets fed and everything like that. So he says, I want to be a permanent slave. So they take him to the door and they put a hole in his ear. He is the slave forever, right? Forever. It says in the Torah, he's a slave forever. What does it mean forever? Until the 50th year. If the 50th year comes 1 year after he has his ear, what is it? The hole made in his ear, and in his earlobe, on the top of his earlobe there, and they make a hole. And if 1 year after he makes this, I'm going to serve you forever, forever and ever. We will never stop. He says, oh yes, forever you will be my slave. They make the hole, right? The next year is the Jubilee year. He goes free. That's the way it goes. Whenever the year comes, we'll learn about that. Let's go. Anyway, you have to count these 7 years. And then you make the Jubilee year. Well, let's go back. We're going to go back to this Kli Ykar, beautiful Kli Ykar. Ve'avarto shofar, and you should sound a shofar, teruah, b'chodesh hashvi'i, in the 7th month. What's the 7th month? Tishrei. It's the 7th month if you're counting from Passover, the 7th month of the Jewish year. The Jewish year has the first month and the first day. The first month of the year is Nisan. The first day of the year, that's in the first day of Tishrei. So here, Tishrei, that's the beginning of the solar year. So that's when the 50th year begins, in the beginning of the 50th year, but it doesn't so totally take effect until the 10th day of the year. The 10th day of that year, that's the holiday of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. Ta'aviru shofar b'kol tzochem. You should sound a shofar in all of the land. Rashi, let's look at Rashi. Lashon haviru kol b'machaneh. Haviru means to sound, to sound a announcement in the whole. Lashon hachraza, to announce it. Yom Kippurim, Memash Mishnamar. One second. Why does it have to tell us the 10th day of the 7th month, the month of Tishrei? The 10th day, you should sound the shofar. That's Yom Kippur. We know that it's Yom Kippur. What does it have to tell us? The Torah. This is God writing this. He knows who the Jewish people are. We know that the 10th day of the month is Yom Kippur. That's the day of the month of Tishrei. Why does it have to be Memash Mishnamar? Because it already says Yom Kippur. Any day, don't I know that it's on the 10th day of the month? If so, why does it say the 10th day of the month? Either say do it on the 10th day of the month, or to say I'm doing it on Yom Kippur, one of the two. And to say Tekiyat Asor L'Chodesh Doche Shabbat B'Kol Artzachem, that if the 10th day of the month falls to be on Shabbat, as you sound the shofar in all the land, that is Yom Kippur. The shofar of Yom Kippur. When do we sound the shofar of Yom Kippur? Only when there was the Jubilee Year. Now we do it in the end of Yom Kippur, but just as a remembrance. It's not a really commandment. The shofar of Yom Kippur does push off Shabbat. The Ein Tekiyat Rosh Hashanah Doche Shabbat, but the sounding of the shofar, if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, we do not sound the shofar. Ela b'beit din bilvad, but only in the court alone. This year, I think it was that way, right? Wasn't it? Yes. Only in the beit din, only in judicial courts do they sound the shofar. Now there's no judicial court, so they don't. If Rosh Hashanah falls on Yom Kippur, if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, then we do not sound the shofar. If the Jubilee day, Yom Kippur, the 50th year, Yom Kippur, falls on Shabbat, then we do sound the shofar. We do sound it. You should make the 50th year holy. And it's a freedom, a day of freedom. The call Yoshvel for all of the people who live there, all the Jewish slaves. Yovel iti elchem. It will be a Yovel year. Jubilee year, but Yovel means a shofar, sounding the shofar. Each person will go back to his land. Also, the land also goes back. And also the slaves will also go back. That's what Rashi says. Let's have a look. It says, you have to make this 50th year holy when? As soon as it comes in other words, the first day of the 7th month, Rosh Hashanah, that becomes the Beit Din sits and they say, this year is holy. It is the 50th year, Rosh Hashanah. What about sounding the shofar on Yom Kippur? We'll see in a moment. Pakrotem Deror is freedom for all the servants, whether the servant has his ear bor nirtza, whether he had his ear made a hole in his ear that he wanted to be a slave forever, ben shalom, or whether or not. Like for instance, ben lo sheish shanim mishinim kar. For instance, he was sold 4 years ago. It was sold. Let's say he sold himself to in the Shemitah year on the 7th year, and the 7th year happened to be right before the Yovel year, so he goes free the next year. Omer Rav Yehuda, Ma'u Lashon Dror. What is this? Where did you get this laya? Dror. Dror means freedom, but it's an unusual word. What does it mean? Why does God use the word dror? Medayer be daira. What does it mean? Shador b'kol makom. There's a bird called a dror, and because it dwells any place, Shu wrote anywhere it wants to, and it doesn't have to dwell in any one place. Also the same thing. All the Jewish servants, they don't have to stay by their masters. They're free to go anywhere they want to. Yovel. This year is separate from all the other years. B'nekiva Shem. It has a separate name. What is its name? Yovel. Why? Because of the shofar. Because you're sounding the shofar, There it is. Therefore, it is called Yovel. We'll see that the Ramban doesn't agree, but then we don't know if we have time to read. B'shavtem ish alachuto. Each person goes back to his original land. More exactly, every land comes back to the original owner. That the fields go back to their owners. Of course, you can't move the field, so the owner just comes back and takes possession of his field, and everyone goes back to his family. The Ravos a nirtza. This includes also the person that was nirtza, that had a hole made in his ear to be a servant forever. He also goes back to his owner. He says that the word Yovel doesn't mean a horn. It means a ram, like a ram's horn. That's why it's called a Yovel. Dichrahu. Arabic call him the Dichra Yovla. The Shofar Yom Kippur, right? It comes from the Ayal. So that's what it means, right? The show. Okay, that's what he is, and he gives a reason why. So the Sforno, he says a little bit deeper. Let's learn these two. Dror, what's this word dror? This is the dror, is the gematria 410, right? Reish 200 and 200. Reish is 200. Dav 410. This is the number dror shanim that they lived in the land of Israel in the first temple. The first temple was 410 years, and then afterwards came Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and he took them into exile. So the Jewish people were free in their own land for 410 years in the time of the temple. There were also there 440 years beforehand in the time of the judges, but that wasn't really the ideal situation. The ideal situation was when there was the temple. Here he says Yovel. You will have a Yovel, that you will be free also from the non-Jews. This is talking about the days of the Mashiach. There will be total freedom for the Jews. Al hepech masha omar atem lo shematem alai likros doror. Because it says, you did not listen to me, to one of the prophets said, you didn't call, because you didn't keep the Jubilee year. So therefore, I think it's in this week's Torah portion, actually. It's a prophecy from Isaiah, right? One second, let me have a look over here. Everything is Isaiah by me. I just don't remember if it was from Isaiah. Anytime I have a doubt which prophet it is, as I attack it onto Isaiah. One second, here we go. All right, I was wrong. It's Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu. And that's what he says. 1 minute. No, 1 minute. Yeah. All right. I'll have to look and see. It could be that does come from actually from Isaiah, from Yeshaya. All right. I have to look and see. Anyways, this is because you Jewish people, the prophet gets angry at the Jewish people, and God gets angry to the Jewish people through the Jews, and says, you didn't keep this 50th year, says God. So therefore, I'm going to put you under the sword and under the hunger, and etc. I remember we learned this, but I don't. We have said this. I have to look and see. Okay, Yovel it is the Jubilee day, Jubilee year. Yovel Shana Tachamishim Shana, the 50th year should be for you. Don't plant, don't harvest, even when it grows on its own, don't gather together your grapes, etc. Yovel says Rashi, what does the Talmud Torah teach us this? Because it says V'kidashtem, like it says in Rosh Hashanah, so at Nizirah. So one second. What happens? It says that the Jubilee year comes in, and everyone goes free. But it says that on the 10th day, when the shofar sounds, then everyone goes free. So when do they go free? They go free on Rosh Hashanah 10 days earlier, or on Yom Kippur, which is when the shofar is sounded. So the answer is all of the servants are freed, but they don't go home. They sit around for 10 days and they eat well and they enjoy themselves. And then on the 10th day, the shofar is sounded, and then they go home. So, and it's all the laws that are by the by the Shemitah year, is also in the Jubilee year. So it comes out that the Jewish people living in the land of Israel, there's 2 years in a row. When the 50th year comes, that 50th year is after you can't work on the land in the 50th year. And the 49th year also wasn't. So there's 2 years in a row that you did not work on the land. Shanat Memtes, the 49th year, because that's a Shemitah year, and the 50th year, which is a Jubilee year. Ki Yovel is a Jubilee year, Kodesh Tielachem. It should be holy to you from the field. You can eat its produce. What does it mean? That you might think that the owner can't eat, that it has to be for everybody. The owner can also eat. It says it's Tosfos the Hektish. This is holy. You might think that if you put money down, that it'll go out to freedom like chulin. The law is like this, that if I have a cow and I want to bring it to the Holy Temple, I want to make a sacrifice par, right? Take it to the sacrifice, and it develops a blemish, so I can redeem it. I can put down money. I can take the cow home and eat it, and I can replace it with another cow, right? So you might think that I can do this, or even put money. I can put money down, and the cow can't be used on the altar anyway because it's no good. So I can redeem it. So you might think that the cow goes out to chulin. The same thing you might think with the produce of the field. You might think that if I have a big field and I have, let's say, grapes on the field, so I can just give money, and the money will become right. Will redeem the thing. Talmalomer Tei. That's not so. No matter what you do, this always remains the produce of the seventh year, always 7th and the 50th year, always remains free. It's all free. In other words, it's free for anyone to eat. You can't buy it and purchase it, take it home to yourself or whatever, or sell it to other people. You can't do it. So if you put money down, so the money becomes holy, you can't use that money for anything. And also the money has to be also given to anybody. How do you say, made ownerless, and also the field. By means of the field, you can eat all the time that there's food in the field. You can even take it into your house and eat it. But as soon as food is gone from the field, you have to take the food out of your house and also make it available to the animals and everything like that. You have to learn the laws of Shemitah and Yovel also. I mean, it doesn't mean that everybody can come into your field and just wreck your field, right? You're allowed to preserve the field so that people don't wreck it. So you can, if you want to, say, okay, I'll pick the fruits, I'll pick them out. No one else comes into my field to pick the fruits because you'll wreck the field. I won't have any. So you can, but nevertheless, the fruits are not yours. You can harvest them, but they're not yours. You have to make them available to everybody. And then in the Jubilee year, everyone goes back to his land. Kli Ykar already said that everybody goes back to the land. But this comes to tell you, a person that sells his field and his son comes and he redeems the field, he buys the field. So you might think now his son has it, so it's kept in the family. No, it doesn't keep in the family. It keeps in the family, yes, but the son has to give it back to his father on the Jubilee year. That was the way it was back then. You could not own land permanently. It went back to the original owner. What's going to happen in the days of the Mashiach, I don't really know. I talked about this before, because it says that the Levites are going to have an additional portion, so the tribes will be reapportioned or whatever. I don't know. Someone once read that about that, but I don't know. Okay. Everybody goes back to their land. Okay, let's just do this over here, and then we'll look at the Kli Ykar. B'shanata Yovel Azot, and this year, in the beginning of the year, it says, you start from the beginning of the 50th year. Right next to it, here we have the next law. This is the end of the law. This is the end of the class today. But tomorrow, we're going to start with the next commandment. It goes like this. If you sell something to your friend, or you buy something from your friend, al tonu ish et achiv. You're not allowed to cheat one another. You can't charge too much. Can't fool people. And there's a lot of laws about what this ona is, but you can't exaggerate. You can't. So you're not allowed to cheat what another person, to lie, to trick another person. This car, perfect shape. It was never driven. The car was never driven. Maybe they drove it from the factory to the lot, and then the owner just decided never to drive it. And you're lying. It was a taxi cab, and it was driven day and night. You just did some things to it to fix it up. You turned back the speedometer a little bit, and you put on new wheels, new tires. So you're not allowed to do that. It's forbidden according to the Torah. Okay, but tomorrow we're going to learn about that. Let's do this today, but God willing. It says, right after this, it says everybody goes back to the land. It says if a person sells something to his friend, so you might think, so it says that portable things, that's called nechasim she'ein behem acharayos. Portable things. You sell your car, you sell your horse, your hat. You put niknim im nechasim sheyesh lehem acharayos. You can sell it on top of the land. In other words, if I have a tractor and a car, and my hat and my cow is on the land, so I can sell the land with everything on it. He doesn't have to make a special possession of these things on their own, which is not the case if I sell someone, let's say my cow, and it's not on the land. So that person has to go in and draw the cow. Somebody has to draw something, or I can lift up something over in one place and the cow becomes mine. But somebody has to take possession of something, right? Which is not the case with land. You don't have to take possession of the portables if the portables are on top of land. You can sell the land and all the portables are with it. Also, it tells that you shouldn't, that also with land, there's also cheating. Cheating also applies to land. You might think that the cheating only applies to things which are portables that you can manipulate, and land not, right? But the cheating also applies to land. Okay. It says everybody goes back to their land in the 50th year. What does it mean you go back to your land? That the owners, even though the owners cannot work on the land as far as agriculture goes, but they are allowed to work on the land to build houses and to put fences around it and to grow flocks on the land and etc. You can also guard the fruits, right, from land, from the animals. You don't have to just let wild animals come and do what they ever want to. So that one is everybody goes back to their original plot. Good. Let's go back to this and see if we can do this here. Kli Ykar. The Kli Ykar, this is Rav Lunchitz, so he has a little bit sort of a deeper insight into this thing, a personal insight. Because nowadays we don't keep the Jubilee year. There is no commandment. We do keep the Shemitah year, yes, but we do not keep the Jubilee year at all. This is only when all the Jews are back in the land of Israel and when there's the temple. This is Tom, the reason for this commandment of the Yovel, the 50th year, is the same reason as the Shemitah year. Namely, that the land rests. 1 year goes back to God. We remember that God is really the boss of the whole business. But in addition to this, there's other reasons as well. The God inside of it. And like it says, you should count for yourself. V'safarta l'cha, it says, v'safarta l'cha, you have to count to yourself 7 years. What do you mean to yourself? Count. What do you mean to yourself? So it must be that there must be something these years in the years that a person has to his own life. People live, generally speaking, especially in this time, until just recently, that's the way it was. People lived 70 years. 70 years was already, reasonable amount of time to live. Nowadays, it's not that way at all. Nowadays, the people live until 90. It's very common. But in those days, it was uncommon for people to live much more than 70. And especially, I remember, like even my grandparents, right? They lived until 70 years. That was when my grandmother, they lived until 70. That was it. That's the way people were. It says usually life of a person is 70, and it even says Yemei Chayim Shivim Shana. You lived 70, 80 years. Generally speaking, people live 50 years. Well, what are you 50 years for? He said 50 because the first years of this 70-year period, the 20 first years, they're not really sort of his, because a person is not really punished in heaven for what he does in the first 20 years. That's what it goes. Strange law, but that's the way it is. It says that the punishment in heaven is only for what you do after you're 20 years old. Therefore, all the deeds that a person does in that time, in the first 20 years, are sort of like nothing. Because in that time, people have excuses, right? I was young, I didn't know. But dayanim or sichlo, a person's mind and his experience isn't really shining. That's why he's not really responsible for his actions. Physically, in a judicial court in this world, of course you are. As soon as you're 13 years old, you're liable for damages and things like that. But but not in the heavenly court. That's what it says. From 20 years and on, then he begins to count. Because then he wants to know how many years are left for him in his life. So this is a thing which he counts alone to himself. This, everybody makes his own calculations. That's what it means. You should count to you these 70 years. Therefore, it says you should count for you. If you count for your own good and for your own, benefit, in order that the rest of your years, the years you have left after you're 20 years old, and let's say by us it's not 20 years old. Let's see people live, but people die. That's it. People die. People do not live forever. There's no one that lives forever. So the days that a person lives in his life, he has to make an accounting after you die, so you can't improve anymore. That's it. Then he'll have 7 complete years. Right? In other words, what does it mean? Then you will have 7 complete years. The rest of your years will be 50, and they'll be filled with good deeds and good ideas and good thoughts. But if you waste your time, and all you think about is making money and gathering riches or popularity or whatever, then lo yelecha zera. Then there won't be any. You planted bad seeds that won't come to you. Because the money that you made and the house that you have and all these things that you got to yourself, you'll give it to other people. Asher benisa, benatata, everything that you built and everything you planted. Because generally, a person cannot hold on to what's his most of these years. B'shana chamishit, b'shanat esrim. But as soon as he gets to his 70 years, he's 70 years old, then a call shavim bahono barachusho below yakatzer od kitzira. Usually, when a person gets to 70 years old, he can't really work anymore, and he can't really gather together and etc. Gather together. So especially if he passes away, so it won't be anything. So that's what he's trying to say, that these days that you have left, this Jubilee, the 50 years that you have left, they should be for your spiritual benefit. And if they are, then, right, then it's to your benefit. But if not, then it's duror, the eved chavshi me'adanav. Then it means that you're free from connection to God, and also your riches also are not permanent, right? They don't even belong to you. There's money all over the place. There's enough money in the world, and it's not owned and it's not yours. The same thing as the Torah and commandments and good things that a person does, that lives forever. So he says that's all the whole idea why this year is called the Jubilee Year. Oh, so in order for a person to, yes, use these 50 years properly, so God says you have to make this 50 years holy. Don't plant, don't work, because just like God commands to make the seventh year holy, that we should remind ourselves that God owns the land. Kach tziva, also God says we should make the 50th year holy to let us know sheyesh gavul b'kitzva l'kol ma'asav, that a person should remember that one day he's going to die, that there's an end to his life. And you don't really own the world and yourself to decide when you are going to pass away or not. You're just a temporary visitor here. The only time you have to rule, so to speak, over your life is these 50 years. In other words, the 50 years after you're 20. Therefore, the land you should not sell forever. In other words, God is not giving you your life forever, because you cannot rule. Because God only gave you the rulership over 50 years, the time that you're here. You can't make anything that's more permanent than that. So therefore, he says, Gerim v'toshavim atem imadi, that you are just temporary dwellings here with me. And because it says that you are with me, so we learn from this that only in the world to come, when you're with me, then you will be truly with me permanently. But in this physical world, you're just temporary dwellers, and God is giving you this land as to work on, right? Like a how do you say, a loan, and you have to work on the land. That's the whole idea of the shofar. The shofar, there was one time notable that the shofar was sounded, and that one was when the Torah was given. When the Torah was given, we talked about this before. When the Torah was given, then the Jewish people became free from the evil impulse. When the Jews have the Torah, so they know what to do. So there's no uncertainty. And if you don't know what to do, so you go to a bigger rabbi, and the rabbi, he knows what to do. Then you are free from the evil impulse and from also all difficulties. Also in Yom Kippur, the same thing with Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the time when it says that we are free from foolishness. It says the devil doesn't work on Yom Kippur. It's the Yetzer Hora, the evil impulse. Yom Kippur, it doesn't work, and also on Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot, both of them have the shofar. Shavuot is the time when the Torah was given. It's one day. It says it's like Yom Kippur. They're free from the Yetzer Hora. And also the same thing is the Shavuot. Says the shofar was sounded and they were free from the Yetzer Hora. If they wouldn't have worshipped the golden calf, 40 days later, there wouldn't even be any death in the world. This all comes to remind the day of freedom. What's freedom? It says when a person passes away and leaves the world, then, so to speak, he's free from the world. All of this is like a remez. I'm reading this all in a way of, homiletic writings, that this is the way of the Torah. But according to the simple meaning, the Shemitah and the Yovel have the same reason. And this is that we should put our trust in God, and we should know Bitchonenu b'Hashem, and we should know that God owns the land. Therefore, it says on this 50th year, from the field, you should eat all of your produce. Don't think that the field is yours. But you have to know that it's just a field. It's not yours. It belongs to God. That's the message of the 50th year. Now, let's learn Pirkei Avot a little bit. That's the end of today's class, and we'll learn Pirkei Avot.